Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So if people want to pull up the text, if you just pull it up on your phones, you can Google Book of Assistance PDF, the Book of Assistance, Imam Al-Haddad. We've been looking at this since the beginning of the year, kind of going through it piece by piece. We shifted here for the summer just because our building space is open only till 8 p.m. in the summer. We want to maintain a space for iftar. I think we'd love to get your feedback just throughout the course of the night. You know, how the setup is. I think one of the things that I'd preferably like to change, but it doesn't mean we have to do it, right? It's not a dictatorship. At least that's not what we tell people. But you know, maybe we'll sit on the ground next time. It'll be a little bit more intimate, or we'll keep the couches to the side for those who need the couches, and all of us will just be seated on the floor, so it's a little bit easier to kind of just see one another and engage in conversation. But if this works also in terms of the setup and we're still able to kind of be as interactive and discussion based as possible, that'd be amazing. Stick around for iftar. There's no kind of restriction time wise in this space. My family and I live in this building. We don't live in this room, but we live in the apartment right above. I don't know how many of you have actually been to our place, which I apologize. Pre-COVID, we used to have a lot of people over constantly, and then during the pandemic, before I got married, my door wasn't even ever locked actually, right? And my kids, subhanAllah, who are now 7 and 10, you're gonna see them in and out. My son made cookies for everybody. They have had the interesting experience where quite often they run into random men who say that they used to live in what is now their bedroom in our apartment. And my son asked me very concerned and also innocently, Baba, how many men have lived with you in your life? And I said, I don't even know half the people that used to just sleep in this place, mashallah. But you know, I had a teacher who told me that a successful community is the one that knows where their imam lives. And accessibility is a really big part of the ethic that we seek to build our community upon, right? The idea isn't to be distant from those that we're in service of as a community, but to be able to engage in meaningful ways. And so I apologize if this is the first time you've ever been to this space or you haven't been to our apartment directly, but looking forward, inshallah, as COVID protocols at NYU have relaxed substantially over the course of the last year, for us to have more gatherings like that, and to figure out how we can enhance this experience. So stick around till the end. We'll pray Maghrib together, we'll have some food together. We're not gonna have artistic pizza today, so it won't be pepperoni pizza or like buffalo chicken pizza. We're gonna order Domino's just to kind of fill the gaps, but we're hoping that the iftar portion of this will be able to add some kind of potluck element or diversify the food options. Khalid really likes the pizza that we serve on Mondays and Thursdays, and I've gotten to a point where I'm so sick of eating pizza that I don't know what we're gonna do, but for tonight we'll have some pizza again. But if people have ideas also, you know, we'll think of things in the area, but we want to make it potluck as well, and encourage us to kind of fast part of the process. Also, I know mashallah that many people maintain the Monday and Thursday fast post Ramadan, and we want to just kind of build off of communal support and the barakah that comes from it to encourage these habits. But even if you're not fasting today, stick around for dinner so that we can still kind of get to know each other better, grow as a community in that way, inshallah. We'll pray Maghrib probably on that side. If you haven't prayed Asr yet, or you need to make wudu or use the restroom, in the back to my left, so you're right, in the corner there's a bathroom that you can use just around where that lamp is at the corner. And the Qibla is this way, facing this corner here, if anybody needs to pray. So why don't we pull up the text. It's the Book of Assistance, Imam Al-Haddad, and we're on chapter 9 on reflection. And so for those who aren't familiar with the text, it's a text on spirituality. It's really easy to find. If you just Google Book of Assistance PDF, it'll pop up. And what this text does is it presents a very easily digestible set of succinct short chapters that allow for individuals to move forward as practitioners in their own spiritual growth. Islam as a religion doesn't separate religion, ethics, and spirituality from one another. If anything, they all synergize within the broader framework of this religion and are in a place where they have a deep connection to each other. The chapters that we've looked at so far, they create now a sequential order that is this roadmap, and it's important to understand because as much as you can draw meaning from them individually, you also want to extrapolate meaning from them to understand how they connect to one another, right? It's not a tradition that is meant to be reductively understood. We're not people who say that we know this one hadith and that one hadith and that's the extent of religion, but understanding that Islam as a religion doesn't have a high bar of entry for anyone to come into it, and there's a lot that we can understand through prisms of what we already know, right? So you might have memorized Surah Al-Ikhlas, for example, one of the shorter chapters of the Quran, Qul huwallahu ahad. And when we're looking at a chapter that's on yaqeen or certitude, on niyyah, on intention, on muraqabah, on vigilance of the heart, on any of the things that we're looking at, you want to be able to enhance the understanding of that chapter through some of these topics and concepts. Do you get what I mean? You want to see how the chapters link to each other and not just understand things rotely in separation, but to start to understand them in terms of how they overlap and inform each other as disciplines so that that inward and outward are able to be more cohesive. Right? We're not meant to be a people that just pray with our bodies, but pray with our hearts. You say assalamu alaikum to everyone? These tiny people are my children, Medina and Kareem. And those are the cookies Kareem made. And Medina brought dates for everybody also. Yeah, alright. So they're gonna stick around too, because they really like pizza as well. And so, you know, we're not meant to be people who just pray with our bodies, but you want to pray with your heart and prostrate with your heart. Understanding also that the premise of this is deepening in a sense of spirituality that defines itself as a mechanism through which we draw meaning from the environments around us. Right? We take understanding and comprehension. You don't see things just as what they are, but they're indicative of that much more. They're signs of things. What we see in the Quran again and again as identifiably ayat that are meant to give us a recognition of comprehension that's not something that's intangible, but escapes many because they just walk around as bodies and just forms as opposed to having real presence and depth as we're moving through things. Are you guys gonna stick around? Yeah? You wanna sit somewhere? You can take some chairs from there. You can come sit here too if you want. Yeah. Does that make sense? And so this is a challenge that comes up, right? We have in our apocalyptic eschatological traditions, for example, a character that's known as Dajjal. May Allah protect us from his fitan. Dajjal is described in many different ways in the prophetic tradition, and one of the ways he's described is as being one-eyed, like literally as one eye. In a more esoteric sense, the understanding of this is contrasted to a verse in Surah Al-Balad where Allah says, Alam naj'al lahu aynayn, that did we not make you with two eyes, right? And so the idea of being one-eyed in the physical sense, but understanding now that this is an apocalyptic character, the end of times, gives us a sense esoterically that with modernity, as we get closer to the end of time, that vision in and of itself is going to start to become absent of depth. That we are supposed to be people who can see both outwardly and inwardly. And what a Dajjalic creature is telling us is that as you get closer to the end of time, people are going to only be able to see in one direction, either outward or inward, but not both ways, the ways that we as people of Iman and people of Ihsan, or aspire to being those things, are supposed to be able to be, right? And then you try to think about it. Who can see bigger than somebody's race, for example? Who's able to see when you go into Muslim communities beyond how you dress or you don't dress? What kind of boxes do people put you in because of the accent you have or the accent you don't have? When we try to understand and make sense of the world around us, we live in New York City right now, for example, and people are walking on the street and they see individuals who are living on the street, but they're not asking why do they live on the street. You might actually see adult human beings relieving themselves publicly. May Allah make things easy for them. Because you got to remember, you have a prophet whose sunnah is when a Bedouin came and urinated in the masjid and people got upset, the prophet did not get upset. The prophet actually said to them, let them finish what they're doing, this individual. When we try to understand this, what is apparent, I can't believe somebody would do this. But when you are in a place where you have a celestial self that's elevated, you're bold enough to ask the question, what kind of world is it that is forcing an adult human being to have to live in this way? How come they don't have access to a bathroom to begin with? Why are they in a place where processes of gentrification that increase rents and all kinds of realities have cast them out into a place where there's not even public facilities that they can engage? Do you get what I mean? And so that's why this text is an important text, because the end result is not something that is just rote memorization, right? 2 + 2 = 4. Here's the verses of the Quran I just spit out in every prayer again and again and again. But ihsan, spirituality, is an experiential knowledge. It's something that necessitates one living and actualizing what it is that they're actually taking as information, and can understand its place in your life, not from a quantifiable aspect. This is how many rak'ahs I prayed. This is how many verses I memorized. This is how many dollars I donated. But you can gauge this simply from, how do I treat people? How do I engage with a sense of etiquette with all of Allah's creation? Not just from the smallest of humans to the largest of humans, but from the smallest of animals to the largest of animals, from the smallest of vegetation to the largest of vegetation, to people of all walks of life and every creature having dignity to it. The state of my heart is indicative from the choices I make and the way that I honor the rights of everything that's around me. So what we're seeking to do is delve deeper into this. If you missed the first 8 chapters, it's all recorded. You can find it online. We can sit and go through it also in more detail if you'd like. But we're going to move into chapter 9, which is on reflection. It's called fiqh in Arabic. Fa, Kaf, Ra. This is a chapter that becomes a subtopic to chapter 5, which is on devotions, awrad, having a wird. And having a daily wird, what Imam Al-Haddad is building that chapter off of, is the idea that time management is essentially self-management. And the way that we can increase in barakah, blessing, metaphysical increase, the ability to do more with less, one of those ways is by bringing structure to our routine. And so he talked prior to this about a few different other chapters that are things that are subtopics to this thing of having a daily wird, a set of litanies, adhkar, remembrances, recitations of the Quran, prayers, etc. So he talked about reciting the Quran daily. That was the next chapter. He then talked about the acquisition of knowledge in chapter 7, having a regular practice of just increasing your knowledge base. He talks about then in chapter 8, remembrance, dhikr, which we talked about before in the last few weeks. And Now we're going to move into chapter 9, which is on fikr, reflection, deep contemplation. So if we want to start chapter 9, can someone start reading for us from the beginning? Who wants to read? Yeah, go ahead.
You should have a period of reflection in every 24 hours, for which you should set aside not 1 or more hours. The best time of reflection is one in which are the least preoccupation, worries, and most potential for the heart to be present, such as the depth of the night. Note the state of one's religious and worldly affairs depends upon the soundness of one's reflection. Anyone who has a share of it has an abundant share of everything good. It has been said, an hour's reflection is better than a year's worship. Ali, may God ennoble his face, has said, there is no worship like reflection. And one of the Gnostics, may God have mercy on them all, said, reflection is the lamp of the heart. If it departs, the heart will have no light.
Okay, so this is one of those things that as a term can't have ambiguity to it, right? The way that we can say live stream, can say laptop, can say cell phone, microphone, all of us in this room will have a common definition. We know categorically what it is that's being discussed. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, Allah says that Adam was taught the names of everything. This is a distinguishing characteristic of humanity, that where we have capacity to embody as best as we can divine qualities, right? Allah is merciful and Allah is good, so be merciful, because being like God is good, and if God is merciful, then be merciful, right? Be gentle, be compassionate. But this notion of Adam being taught the names of things is that we also have a capacity to embody in a human level divine intellect as best as we can. It makes us distinct from the rest of creation. Perception is something that we can do uniquely. And here now, the names of things is what gives us the ability to deepen in the meanings of things. The more you have in your lexicon, the more that it is then you can understand and comprehend, right? Like if I asked you how you were feeling, all of you in the room, most of us would probably say the same 6 words again and again. But the emotions that you feel are 31,000 in number. So everything you feel is not just sadness or anger or happiness or things like that. Do you get what I mean? And when we start to misname or mislabel or have limited understanding of a word and there's ambiguity, it's harder to harness it, not because there's not aspiration, but because there's not definitiveness towards what it is that we're seeking. So if I said to all of you, go over there, and then you got up and you moved in whatever direction you could, and you didn't land where I wanted you to land, and then I said, well, why aren't you where I wanted you to be? You said, well, you didn't really tell us too much about it. You just said, go there. That's fundamentally how it is that we work with language also, right? The way you know concretely 2 + 2 = 4, and you know the word live stream or cell phone with concrete definition, what does it mean when someone says love to you? What does forgiveness mean to you? What does compassion mean? What does mercy mean? What does good mean? They can't have ambiguity. They have to have concrete definitions. So what I'd like you to do is just turn to the people around you and talk this out. What does this mean to reflect? What is it that we're talking about when we're talking about reflection? If we were to give it a definition so that we can actually start to build a relationship with this thing. If you turn to the people around you, share your names if you don't know your names yet. If there's room next to you on a couch, just let us know as people come in so they have more places to sit. But let's talk this out. How do we define reflection itself? And then we'll come back and discuss. So go ahead. So what did we come up with? What is, if we were to define reflection, what would we say? Whoa. Yeah.
We talked about just one of the reason why it's so difficult to define reflection or to reflect is simply because we're so busy in our daily lives constantly. Like we're programmed to do stuff, right? Like quite often on autopilot. So for us, like some people said that the time when they really like drop in and start to contemplate is either before sleep or physical exercise. Basically, when we are not, when we dedicate some period of time, like still to do something, whether it's to work out or to try and rest. This is when this state of reflection just creeps in, because that's the only time when our brain is not overstimulated with work or whatever it is we have to do. So one of the things we talked about is just how one of the reasons why it's so difficult to like really reflect, as if not to just talk, but like to drop into feel the feelings and see where they take you, is that we're just we're too busy.
Okay, great. So understanding what something is principally by recognizing what it's not is important, right? So these are the things that get away, and these are some of the things that make it a little bit difficult. What else? Like if we were to make a definition, right? My 7-year-old, my 10-year-old comes up to you and says, what is fikr, right? What does it mean to contemplate, to reflect? Like what is this world, right? If I went and said to them, go engage in reflection, I have to give them some kind of understanding on what that actually looks like. Do you get what I mean? Yeah. So what is that? Yeah, go ahead.
We brought up the idea of like reflection, like the idea of a mirror, right? So a mirror reflects, so that, and we kind of just were going back and trying to put things together. The idea of like reflection being analyzing like the things that you experience, or specific things like through like your prism in a sense. So like analyzing your reaction to things, or analyzing your life, or things that you come across through your own experiences almost.
Okay, great. So there's kind of an analysis of something, right? But here there's a key characteristic. It's got to be upon something. Do you know? You're not just sitting and engaged in a stillness that then there's just a vacuum, but the reflection needs to be upon something. What that thing is can vary, and we can identify that and distill it more, but there's something there that the reflection needs to be done upon. Anything else characteristically of this? Yeah.
So we started something similar. We started with, it seems like we usually have a very narrow definition of reflection, and I think you mentioned it. We start with our children when they do something wrong. Go to your room and reflect over what you did. So it's usually it's a time to think about what you did and how it was wrong and how you may correct that. But then we thought, that's a very narrow definition of reflection, and it should be beyond that. And some of the things we touched on was just allowing yourself to change your perspective. And we just talked about, a more cosmic perspective, which might, like zooming out and seeing how you're part of something so big and how you're related to creation. But then also zooming in and realizing how big and complicated even you are, your body and your psyche. And that might just be the starting point to reflecting on something meaningful. It's just, I guess we would probably just talking about getting in some zones, some depth.
Well, he's making a big claim here, right? He says that the Gnostics say that reflection is the lamp of the heart. When it departs from it, there's no light in it. So a key element to having luminosity within is this thing of reflection. So why don't we kind of reframe it so we're not talking too abstractly, and we're talking more tangibly. What do you reflect with? Like what part of you do reflection with?
I say usually the mind and the heart.
The mind and the heart? Okay, how? How are the mind and the heart? So if we were to analyze ourselves through a Islamic framework of the self, right? You have your physical body, your jasad, your badan. You have the ruh, the soul. You have the nafs, the lower self. You have irada, sheer will and determination. You have the qalb, the spiritual heart with its layers. You have the aql, the intellect. This is what makes you who you are on a whole, right? And it's important to get down to it at its most fundamental level. You don't reflect with your hands necessarily, right? You don't reflect with your eyes. It's not a physical thing. The way that you hold with your hands, you don't reflect with your hands. And that might seem obvious, but it has to be something that as we now start to synergize these various responses so far, the things that get in the way are usually things that are outward, that prevent an opportunity for the inward to do what it's meant to do. So if we can agree that the organs of cognition are the mind and the heart, and these are the things that, if anything you're going to reflect with, is going to be these things, right? Does anybody think otherwise? Like, what can you reflect with, contemplate with? Right? You're going to use your head, right? You're going to use your heart, right? When you use those things now, how do they relate from a reflective standpoint to the rest of you? Does the question make sense? Like, can my heart reflect only on matters of the heart? Can my heart reflect only on matters of the mind? Can my mind only reflect on matters of the mind or the heart? Or what are the things that the mind and the heart can actually engage in a thought process on? Does that make sense? Like, when you think about things, what are the things that you think about? Not specifically, but generally, categorically, what is your mind able to think about?
Everything.
Huh?
Anything and everything.
Exactly. So reflection can be on anything. So when you're in a place now where the rest of you is connected to all of you, you can reflect not just on bad habits, go to your room. And quite often that's not reflection, that's self-deprecation, right? And don't give shaitan victory over you. You don't want to ruminate. All of these words mean different things. The etymological root of rumination is like rooted in an understanding of how like cows eat their food. They're just constantly chewing the cud again and again and again. That's how people think quite often. They ruminate on negativity. The thoughts just weigh you down heavy. That's not what reflection is. It's a spiritual act that's meant to give you insight and clarity on things. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. But fundamentally, you can reflect on what your ears hear, what your hands touch, the food that you taste, the things that you experience, what you feel. All kinds of things have the ability to be reflected upon, but that doesn't mean necessarily that we're actually reflecting on those things, right? But the potential is there to reflect on anything. And when you can start with the broad base that I can reflect deeply on anything, then I can start to now think out, well, why am I not doing it in the ways that I'm doing? Medina, baby, can you grab some more chairs from the closet? Thanks, guys. Do you get what I'm saying? Everybody thinks. Right now, all of you are thinking something. That's not the goal. The goal is to not be in a place where the success is to simply think, right? Because everybody thinks. The goal is to be in a place where you reclaim the ability to choose what you think about and how you think about the things that you're thinking about. You're not running on autopilot. You're not going just in default settings. You're not meant to be a body that just walks through the earth. You are a soul. You have organs of cognition where you can think, you can reflect, you can contemplate. I'd like for you to turn to the persons next to you now and just talk this out. What are the potential benefits of actually engaging in reflection? Because you want to notice, right? Imam Al-Haddad, he says on Quran and on fiqh that you want to do this daily. This, he says, in a 24-hour period, and he doesn't even leave it for chance. He says you want to dedicate an hour or hours in that 24-hour period in reflection. It doesn't mean that you sit for 3 hours, but the sum total of reflection throughout the course of your day, right? You pray your prayer, your heart's a little open. It's a time where you can take in. But understanding that in these 2 chapters as subtopics to the awrad, the Quran and reflection, the recitation of Quran and reflection, he's saying you gotta do it every day. Why? Why is it something that has benefit to it? Because it's not meant to be something just for the sake of it, right? We could talk about why would you sit in a couch versus on the ground? Should we get this vegetable or that vegetable on a pizza? We can have discussions that can render insight, preference, judgment. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking you, why is there benefit to this thing of reflection? What are the gains that one can draw from engaging in this in a process so much that this man, who is a spiritual master of this religion, is telling you, do it every day. The way that you sleep every day, the way that you eat every day, the way that you pray every day, the way that you do all of these things every day, the way that you should be laughing every day, the way that sometimes you should be able to apologize on a daily basis, that you want to tell someone you love them and be told that you are loved, expressing gratitude, and being in a place where you are willing to receive gratitude, to do right by others, but also to be comfortable in letting somebody do something for you. There's a lot of things that if they happen every day, the gains are things that are undeniable. So why is this something that he's saying is so beneficial that you wouldn't want to live 24 hours without dedicating an hour of it at least towards this practice of reflection? So you turn to the persons next to you and ask and discuss this. What's the benefit of this thing? What are the things that we can take from it? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the benefits to this? Like why? Why would somebody do this on a daily basis?
To be a better person.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were just discussing. It's the reflection is when you reflection is judgment in for yourself. You are judging your attitudes, your way of behavior. So is it good? Is it bad? Why am I doing it? Am I doing it for a small purpose, or for humanity, or for myself, for my family? Should I do it again or not? So we think that it is basically you are judging yourself. You are judging your attitudes.
Great. It tells you where you are right now in life, right? It gives you an idea, like this is where I'm standing in relation to where I potentially could be. Assessment, accountability, inventorying. What else? What are some of the benefits of this? Yeah.
You talked about like being aware and being mindful in all kinds of ways, that it can just again brings you awareness. It just helps you to be better if there's something that you need to resolve with yourself, or just act on it, or maybe like be grateful for whatever things that you have in life, maybe think about things that you did well, and it just can affect you in all kinds of ways.
Great. So this is an important thing to understand. The vehicle to increase virtue is quite often the virtue itself. So if you want to become more patient, the way you become more patient is by being patient. So the way that you can increase in mindfulness, reflection, consciousness, awareness is by being conscious, aware, and mindful. So if I engage in the practice of solitude, reflection, we'll talk about in more detail in like 10 minutes, but I'm essentially deliberately engaged in the exercise of reflection, right? Ihsan, we talked about in the very beginning, is a vision-based process of spirituality. Husn is beauty that's with the eye. So if I had a board here and we put eyesight at the top, if you could see that right here, it says eyesight. We wouldn't now create a diagram that says here are things that are built off of eyesight as subcategories of eyesight, but we'd create a circle and we would connect from eyesight an arrow that went now to hindsight, an arrow that went on the other side to foresight, and an arrow that went straight down that goes to insight. And then we put connecting arrows between hindsight and foresight to insight. So all of it is connected to each other. Can you see it in your head? Do you get what I'm saying? Right? This all connects. Insight, foresight, and hindsight. They're not meant to be clever phrases. These are words that have meaning to them. And when you are engaged in this process of reflection in any of these categories, as well as we'll see outward with the eye, as he's going to say, you reflect on Allah's creation, you look at the sun, you look at the stars, right? I said this to you last week, that how is it fundamentally possible when we were talking about dhikr, that people don't gauge the beauty and the awesomeness of the fact that a tree has the ability to have its leaves die and come back to life again, and die and come back to life again, and die and come back to life again. This is a reflection of the eye outward that then builds off of insight, hindsight, foresight. Do you get what I'm saying? But the process of increasing in mindfulness, so that when I'm walking through the park and I see the beautiful flower, that time I spent in spiritual exercise of reflection, seated in the place where he's describing this. The best time for reflection is the one in which are the least preoccupations, worries, and most potential for the heart to be present, such as the depths of the night. Right? He's giving qualities of what a space of solitude should be, but the idea is that now when you do that there, it brings mindfulness to its presence when you're outside in a place that everybody else is just walking on default settings, right? So the virtue is the vehicle to increase in the virtue itself. Does it make sense? What else? What are other benefits to this practice of reflection? Yeah.
We talked about how fundamentally it's about separating truth from falsehood, and any decision-making process, whether short-term or long-term, is dependent on how accurate you can do that. So when you are engaging in foresight, insights, all the different angles, intellect, heart, body, as much, basically the more you can listen to and reflect upon, the higher is the chance that you will find your truth, and therefore, will live a happier, more fulfilling life.
Yeah, right. And this is a dua the Prophet would make to Allah, to allow for him to see reality as reality, to see what is true is actually true, and what is false is actually false. But everything can be seen on multiple vantage points, right? And understanding what are other things I might see things through then. I might see it constantly through my pain. I might see it constantly through my exhaustion. Most of us see the world just through burnout. We see it just through poor eating habits, poor social habits, poor sleeping habits, right? It creates now a circular pattern that there is just monotony to the day. The idea isn't that every single day is supposed to be so different from the day before, but I am different every day that I meet these things that might seem mundane, but I can bring novelty to it because there's change that I'm embracing from within. And that reflective process enables me to find growth, to find meaning in whatever it is that is taking place around me. Other benefits that people can think of? Yeah.
I think from personal experience, introspection helps me soften my heart to see things from other perspectives, which helps me relate to other people more compassionately.
How does it do that?
I see if I'm contemplating about God's creation, I'm thinking to myself, how did this come about? I'm softening my heart and knowing that there's something greater above myself that has the capability to do that, which takes me to the place where I'm removing myself off any pedestal and allowing myself to see myself in the smaller scale of things.
Great. And this is a great segue now into the how-to of reflection. One of the things that can yield this as an outcome is that the exercise of reflection is going to force you to actually also rest. And if your outward is constantly in a state, not of movement, because movement is not a problem, but in a state of just agitation, you're chasing after what you don't know, and you're in a place where you don't know how to rest. The stillness that reflection requires for it to be impactful will have residual benefit that can actively allow for the heart to actually now be in alignment in a way where in this spiritual paradox of our tradition, that a hard heart is a weak heart and a soft heart is a strong heart. And the softening of it is in this space of finding that stillness and rest and being comfortable with it. I don't always have to be doing something or touching something or pushing something or watching something or scrolling something. And these are not meant to be things that you've heard already and they go in one ear and out the other. But you want to be a conscious person and understand that if it is dumb to do, then why do you do it? And you can look at all kinds of data and all kinds of analysis by people who work in wellness in all fields professionally. Little kids who are building out all kinds of focusing issues, challenges, and psychologists tell their parents, we can't do anything for you if you're not willing to take the phone away from your child. If you're not willing to take the screen away from your child. It's not different when you're an adult and you're in a place where constantly, statistically, 22 years of every average person's life now is going to be spent looking at their screens. 22 years of existence. Can you imagine? That's insane. You juxtapose it to stats of how many years of your life you spend eating and sleeping and going to the bathroom versus now this is a new stat. It's a modern phenomenon. We have to deal with it and see how does our theology, our legal tradition, our spiritual tradition not bear relevance because we go out and seek validation from a anti-black supremacist society that's not going to ever accept you for who it is that you are unless you accept yourself. That's not the relevance, but the relevance is when there become now conundrums in the prism of what's in front of us contemporarily, we engage our text to be able to say, well, how do you respond to this? So you start to rest. You allow for yourself to say, it's okay for me to not constantly be chasing after something. I can breathe. I can relax. I don't have to do everything right in the moment. So one of the main things is that this has to be done deliberately in places of stillness. It doesn't mean you have to be away from people, but you have to be away from distractions. You cannot have reflection reach its pinnacle if you surround yourself with distractions. You have to remove the distractions from your way. Step number 1, no distractions. Number 2, be at peace with silence. You can't listen if you're talking. And there's no learning if there's not listening. And the cognitive abilities of the heart and the mind, and the ability to synthesize information from organs of sensory perception, the eyes that we see with, the hands that we touch with, the tongues that we taste with, the ears that we hear with. Think about this now. We are finishing the month of Shawwal. Just yesterday it finished, the day before, right? May Allah accept it from us. You're a month away from Ramadan. Does it feel as strange to eat now as it did on the day of Eid? And if the answer is no, it means that you are becoming desensitized to the mindfulness you had after a month of fasting. And that's not to knock anybody, but you have to know where you are in relation to where you'd like to be. What got in the way? And silence is important because it helps you to hear other things. It allows for you to experience and pay attention to other things. Man kana yu'minu billahi wa bil yawm al-akhir falyakul khayran aw liyasmut, the hadith says, that whosoever habitually believes in Allah and the last day, let them speak good or be silent. This is a saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the idea is, don't say what's bad, say what's good, but the default state is also don't say anything at all. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Speak good or don't speak. So you have to be comfortable in a spiritual diet with silence. To be in a place where you're taking in reflection and allowing for there to not be chaos or commotion. This is why it's important. You got to understand, when people are praying and you're talking, when you learn to be the imam, you're taught to listen to the cry of the baby. You want to be mindful of the sounds that are around you, right? This is not absent of khushu'. But if the adhan is being called and you're talking during the adhan, then nobody's judging you. Put away the people who make religion black and white and tell you that you're terrible. You're not, you're beautiful. Think about it though. How can you listen to the adhan if you're talking during the adhan? How can you listen to the recitation of Quran if you're not in the place where the Quran is being recited? And if you're there and you're talking, how can you hear it being recited? You can't do both things simultaneously, right? Right? Like I'm talking, I talk a lot, you know what I mean? As I'm talking, I'm not like listening. It's not the same as like you're singing in the shower or you're like exercising and watching TV. This is not the same. The stillness and the silence go hand in hand in elevating what it is that we can take in, because you all are the ones that said, right, that you can think about anything. Do you know what I mean? Location is important. In modernity, we have amazing opportunities through technological advancement, growth of all kind. It boggles my mind how easy it is, for example, for us to raise funds for people just through sending emails and text messages. But modernity also offers certain gaps, and one of the gaps in the prism of modernity are places of stillness. Actual locations where you can go to reflect. And this is going to be most important. Doesn't mean you have to go stand on the cliff of a mountain overseeing a still like bay and everything is great and the sun is shining and setting upon you and butterflies are flying in your face and birds are bringing you flowers. That's not how it works. The Prophet sought solitude in a cave, that if you've ever been to that cave, it is the smallest thing in the world. It is not big. One person can fit in it at a time, and it's hard to get up there, especially without the steps that they've built into the mountain right now, right? So where do you go to find stillness? Where in the course of your day, your week, your month, where do you go to find that place of stillness that is a place of solitude? It doesn't have to be about being away from people, but about being away from distractions. Where is that place for you? Now, ideally just in pairs, so that two people are talking and everybody gets to talk. I'd like you to talk to the person next to you about this. Where do you go to find stillness in your day? Where do you go to find that place where reflection can actually be happening? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Where do you go for your stillness to find a place where you can reflect?
Scuba diving.
What are the characteristics of it? Scuba diving? Yeah, amazing. Yeah. We don't all live in Turkey, Barbara. We can't swim in the water around us, but we're happy you can swim where you come from. Where does one go, right? And this is a great example. You can, right? You're creating the environment for yourself. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. What does it feel like for you when you go scuba diving?
No, we were just talking. Actually, in a daily life, I really don't need to do something special. So it's like I can just close my eyes somewhere in the house and just think about myself. But I was saying I did when I first started scuba diving. I really liked it. Then I was just thinking, and my friend said that when he is down, he says, I feel like that is the closest place where I'm with God. So then I start thinking about it when I'm down there, because it's totally silence. You're totally with you. You're listening to yourself. So it's then I start looking at it like that. So it's a place where you can listen to yourself.
Amazing. Yeah.
Definitely is a quiet place.
Huh?
So it definitely is a quiet place.
Quiet place? Yeah. Under the water is great. So, that's the song, Little Mermaid, right? Under the sea. Yeah. What else? Like, what? Yeah, go ahead.
So during the Chaplain, when I wake up during the nights, it's quiet, and especially when I'm in sujood, I feel like it's pretty quiet, and yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever wonder why your mind and the state it's in is different when you're standing in prayer versus when you're prostrating in prayer? Like, how many thoughts get in your head when you're standing in prayer versus when you're in sajda? Right? It's like two different worlds. Do you know what I mean? Why? Why do you think? Huh? Because what?
The blood rushes to your head.
The blood rushes to your head? Yeah, maybe. But maybe from like a religious standpoint. What's going on? Huh?
You're bowing down.
Who's bringing the thoughts to your head when you are standing in prayer? Shaitan, right? You think, what do you know about prostration?
So it's closest that is to Allah.
You're closest to Allah. The kind of things you think about when you're standing, they're usually not like mundane things, like, oh man, like, I wish, I could get some chocolate milk tomorrow for breakfast, right? It's not really what's popping in your head. It's the argument you're having with somebody, right? Why is it so hard to find a job? How come nobody invites me to things? Why don't my parents let me marry the person I want to? All kinds of thoughts can come into our head. And when you go into sajda and you're closest to Allah, it's also the place where, depending on certain variables, but let's just assume we're all on the same page, you can make dua for whatever you want to at that point in time. And in that prostration, the du'as are more readily accepted. And Shaitan's putting stuff in your head when you're standing, and he knows exactly what he's doing to keep it away from your conscious mode of thought when you have the ability now to make dua for it in a different capacity. That's why reflection is important outside of prayer, because when you're in the prayer, you want the reflective mind and heart to be on your own terms, standing with thoughts that are coming from the best places of you in your thoughts. Do you get what I mean? What else? Where are other places? What are things that we look for in places of reflection? You can't think about this as good and bad, right? At some level, when you start to grow in your own sense of relationship to Allah, like he's 7 years old. Do you know what I mean? I know he looks like he's 45, but he's not. He's 7 years old. Most of us stop learning Islam at this age. We get to a place where now when you're 40, you're trying to make sense of religion based off of information that was given to you and reflection that did not happen for decades. And when I take information, the first prism I get through is I must be bad because of this, or I must be good because of this. Versus you just understand how things function and the utility of them. So it's not because you're bad you don't make dua, or that you're bad that the thoughts come, or this and that. You just understand what it is. Like he said, Barbaros, right? He didn't think about what he didn't think about. But now the thought is there. I can understand it and contemplate upon it in different ways. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? What are other things that we can look for in a place of reflection? Like I'm starting to determine for myself, I want this thing. The benefits, they make sense to me. I want a soft heart. I want to be able to be aware when I walk through the street. I want to be nice and kind. I want to be able to make sense of things for what they actually are and see reality as reality and falsehood as falsehood. I don't want to walk around like a cow or a zombie or just a body. I want to be a heart. I want to live in the world with like a wakeful, thriving heart. So what other things do I need when I am now situating myself in a place of reflection? What does that place need to be like? Quiet, right? Yeah, quiet. And for some people, that can be their house. For some people, may Allah make things easy, the house is not quiet. Or sometimes it's in the understanding of the routine. So when he's saying in the late hours of the night, that's when there's stillness. Because what's everybody doing in the late hours of the night? Right? People are knocked out. People are doing all kinds of stuff different times a day, but when you're in your home and it's late at night, there's just stillness. You ever walk in the city on a weekday, morning before the city wakes up is crazy. You know, it's very different. But the idea isn't, again, being away from people, it's about being away from distractions. There's not so much that can distract you at those times of the day, those times of the night. You were going to say something?
Yes, I mean, yeah. So physical safety is a big one for me, like feeling safe. Because right now I'm in a situation where I live with many people, and so the only time I can get a quiet, like some place is in the park. Then the problem is like I'm sitting in the park and I'm trying to contemplate, and I can't stop thinking about somebody just coming up and like stabbing me or something like that, because I'm still in a public place.
What park do you live near, man? What's going on?
It's me. I'm just saying that, for me, like...
No, that's fine. That's real. And you can control, right? This is the whole thing. The idea with this, you are not any one of your thoughts, because then who's thinking the thoughts? Just like you're not any one of your feelings, because somebody's got to be feeling the feelings. So the thoughts come and they rise up, and reflection is what gives us the capacity to now be able to deconstruct or break down or take advantage of our thinking ability to say that, well, just because the thought is there doesn't mean that it comes from me. He started to think about something, scuba diving, from somebody else putting a thought in his head, right? It wasn't a bad thought, it was a good thought. But the thought came from elsewhere. Do you get what I'm saying? Think about how many times you've been stressed out. And when you're dealing with stress and life's difficulties, and you start to go talk to friends and family, and they love you, but they don't know what to do, and they don't say, I don't know. They're not empathetic in their listening. They don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. There's often solutions. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Now, when you have all of this exhaustion and stress, you now have their voices in your head too. And it just adds more to it. And the thought is there, this didn't work. I must be bad because I couldn't get this done or that done, right? Just a big mess. Do you know what I mean? So yes, safety is important, right? And being able to understand where and how I can find opportunity for reflection, I need to have a comfortable environment where I'm not worried that somebody's going to come and do something to me. Yeah.
Just say something about that being knocked out at night. You know, he says that that's the best time or a good time to reflect. But what if you're one of those persons that's knocked out at night?
That's okay.
Then how do you?
Because you want to be acquainted with yourself, right? Like this guy, when he was 3, he like, I don't even know, wakes up 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, right? He gets up now and he's gotten older, so he doesn't run right into our room at that time, sometimes still. But ever since he was really little, he would wake up super early, be ready to go, jumping up and down. And his sister, who I think is still in the room,
He's over in the back.
really amazing person also, and she tends to wake up later in the day. And there's times when my baby girl is not trying to get out of bed, I gotta carry her out of bed, and she's slept for like 10, 12 hours, and she's still exhausted, right? He is a morning person, she is a night person. There's times when people are in our house, they're having a good time, and he's looked at me or Priya and said, I just gotta go to sleep right now. And then he just goes in his room. She'll stay awake till any time in the morning whatsoever. They're kids. They're not good or bad, they're innocent. They just respond to the day differently, right? Some of you, some of us, when it's cold outside, it just brings down our mood. When there's more daylight in the day, it helps to kind of make things feel a little more light. Do you get what I'm saying? You have to have self-awareness to be able to understand, where do I bring this stillness? And location becomes now intrinsically linked to timing for yourself. You get what I mean? If I wake up and in the middle of the day, I am in a place where my kids are up, my wife is up, everyone's up, and then I yell, everybody needs to be quiet because I gotta find some stillness, right? That's not gonna work. Do you get what I mean? I chose to be married, I chose to have children. I also then choose how it is that I engage time around me. And so I build stillness at moments where it makes sense. Do you get what I mean? In terms of practice within our tradition, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he regularly would engage in this as a practice. Sorry, I think this is the pizza. Hello? Hello? Guess not. He would engage in what's called tahannuth, right? He would move out of his society, find solitude, and be in a place where he wasn't running away from people, he was just trying to understand what his role was in the world. Maryam, peace be upon her, the mother of Jesus, peace be upon him, would engage in reflection in this way. She went into the temple at a time when people were not going into the temple, let alone women. Musa alayhi salam, he separated himself from the Bani Israel for 40 days. What were they doing at that time? They were seeking solitude deliberately. The solitude wasn't something that was an escape from reality, but a means through which they would enhance the understanding of the reality they found themselves in. And in solitude, big things happened. The Prophet got his first revelation in solitude. Musa alayhi salam speaks with Allah in solitude. Maryam, peace be upon her, gets fruit from nowhere in solitude. And characteristic of each of them was that whenever they left, they always came back to their people. It wasn't about, let me run away, but let me use it as a means of enhancement to come back to where it is that I need to be. So the world is now different because I'm a little bit different. Do you get what I mean? It's built into our tradition. The i'tikaf happens in Ramadan. That's what it is. You're seeking this solitude. You engage in processes of reflection. What we want to be able to do is think about this now in your routine. On a daily basis, when are you engaging in this type of reflection? The word fikr, it is got the same root as the word for notebook in Arabic, mufakkir. And the idea is that you can see the link between these two terms. What I would do if I were you is get something that isn't a device that you use in a way mindlessly. But you get a notebook and you reflect into it. How did my day go today? Was today a good day? Was it a bad day? What is going to make my day good a week from now? What will my 99-year-old self say to me in gratitude for how I lived my life at this age? When I stand in front of Allah, what will that look like? When people are eulogizing me at my funeral, what will they say about me? There's so many different things that you can reflect upon, that you can think about, contemplate upon, engage in reflection around. And what Imam Al-Haddad is going to do now is he's going to go through the process of giving us insight on ways that we can do this. So let's continue in the text. He says the ways of reflection are many. Can somebody start reading from there? Who wants to read? The ways of reflection are many. Yeah, go ahead, Luna.
The ways of reflection are many. One, which is the most noble of them, is to reflect on the wonders
Okay, we're coming down.
dazzling creation, the inward and outward signs of his ability, and the signs he has scattered abroad in the realm of the earth and the heavens. This kind of reflection increases your knowledge of the essence, attributes, and names of God. He has encouraged it by saying, "Say, look at what is in the heavens and the earth."
Keep going.
Reflect on the wondrous creatures he has made, and on yourself. He has said, "In the earth are signs for those who have certainty, and in yourselves. Can you not see?"
Okay, so if you can turn to the person next to you, what are you taking now? A deliberate thing to reflect upon. What are these two paragraphs telling us to engage in as a process of reflection? Go ahead, and then we'll come back and discuss. Yeah. Okay, so what is Imam Al-Haddad saying in these two paragraphs? What are we taking away from it? The ways of reflection are many. He says one of which is the most noble of them, to reflect. What is he telling us practically to reflect upon here? Huh?
Gratitude.
That's in the third paragraph. But just these two, where he's talking about, or yeah, maybe gratitude. I could see that. Yeah. Yeah. What else?
I think what I'm reading is like reflecting on the world around you, and it's also outward and inward reflection. I was telling about this morning, come back from Treasure, like there's a mostly like 2 blocks from me, and then there's these birds that were like clearly having a conversation. The one would do like 3 sounds, the other one would do 5 sounds. It was like a back and forth that kept going. I was like, I couldn't help but think about Allah and just like the wonder of it all, and that often is like my way of reflecting and just like thinking about these things, and then also like going from that to then myself. If like I'm recognizing this has happened, then what am I seeing in myself and in the wonder that is me in my existence?
Yeah. What does he mean by something that's wondrous? Yeah.
To me, and connecting that part with the part about the signs of his ability, I also think about like the living and non-living, sort of like miraculous things that some people would call coincidences, like the tilt of the world's axis, and like a water molecule that is like sort of like in perfect balance. The fact that like you go to the smallest of things and to the biggest of things, like a canyon, and it all sort of like makes sense, as if like God knew that we would scratch up every single part of his creation or like try to look for meaning, and there is a meaning there to be explained. I think that's where I read sort of like those signs of intentionality.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? The earth is on a certain axis. If you can imagine the sun that is so far away from us, if it was closer in any capacity or farther in any capacity, we'd either burn or freeze, right? Like, it's so far away, but it still makes you hot on a sticky day in Manhattan, right? You go to places in the world where it's so far and you still feel the presence of its heat, and it's so far that you still can feel when it's slightly a little bit different in proximity, just how cold it can get. But if it was any other distance, you can put them up here, guys, if you want to.
There's more.
Okay, great. But that proportionality is remarkable in how it becomes applicable in everything else around us, right? What else? What else are we taking from this? Yeah.
I'm just again also reflecting on what you just said about like looking at the universe and looking within ourselves. So, like basically looking at the universe and what now we call science, basically all the laws of physics and all the laws that are considered laws are based on like the perfection of Allah's creation and everything, and now we just have to go from it and looking at us as human beings and how everything is just so perfect, and it's just like like everything is just meant to be in its place. Our DNAs have been created by Allah. And this is the thing, like looking at the stars that we have, just like a non-living thing, and every single just one nucleotide just drives us from like, going through the Latin alphabet to the onto now, and we can't stop it because of a single thing. So you can't just like leave it out randomly. So just going and seeing how everything is just perfect and reflecting on the names of Allah. This is that he's the creator, and he's the yes, so he's like the creator and like being also creative in that sense, and also the only who has the ability to just make everything just so in how small we are and how big it is.
Yeah, right. And you're taking the reflection all the way to its most logical concluding point. It's not just like how beautiful is the sunrise, but how magnificent must be the one who made this sun in this way in the first place. And you take stillness and you stop for a bit, and you can understand the essence of God is different in Islam from other religious traditions. Even religions that claim to be monotheistic, the mode of monotheism is distinct categorically in Islam from other religious traditions. Allah's capacity, ability, is something that you don't have to believe in order to believe that He made you. You can believe that God created you and that He's Al-Khaliq without being in a place where you ever try to just think about how crazy it is the way that all of this is put together. You don't have to think about it even for a second. The two can be mutually exclusive. So Imam Al-Haddad is saying, you're going to reflect. Here's point number one. Reflect just on how remarkable all of this is, and then think how remarkable must be the one who put it all together. And if you're in a place where the sun rises and the sun sets and how everything functions at those scales are things that might not be accessible in the same ways, you don't have to look so far. Just look at the way that you were made. Look at how it is that you have been built and how you have been created. And just truly how stupendous it is. One of the craziest things that I have ever witnessed in my life was the birth of my daughter. And inshallah, for those of you who desire children in your life, may Allah bless you with amazing children. And for those of you who are seeking companionship, may Allah grant you the best of companions. I would recommend, if you are in that relationship already or seeking it out, that you make a firm commitment that if and when you choose and Allah blesses you with children in your life, that you are in a place where you let your partner, and also you are, if you're the other person involved, not the pregnant one, but the non-pregnant one, that you are supporting your partner every step of the way. It was crazy to hear my daughter's heartbeat for the first time. When our doctor showed us a sonogram and was pointing things out, my wife looked at the picture and she said, Khalid, look at how cute our baby's face is. Medina didn't have a name at that time. And then the doctor, who was looking over her shoulder, said, yeah, that's actually her butt. My wife wasn't even fazed. She was like, that's cute too. But when I was in the room where my wife was pregnant for 36 hours, she was in labor. For 36 hours, she was in labor with our first child. And being in a place where I witnessed just firsthand the experience of a child being born into the world is the craziest thing you can ever imagine seeing. Subhanallah. Like, to experience that. And in that room, I was the only one. My wife didn't get to see the baby being born the way I got to see it being born. When Kareem was born, he was a C-section baby. It's also pretty remarkable, but it was something that, a story I'll tell you another day, in terms of what that was like in the hospital. But just seeing it and being in a place where you say, how can you not believe in God? How can you fundamentally not believe in the existence of a divine entity? And what's getting in the way? And so all Imam Al-Haddad is asking and challenging you to do is, you don't know a starting point? Here's something to start on. Look at the world around you. Look at everything that's amazing. Look at yourself. Think about how it's crazy. You get a cut and the skin just heals. Your head hurts and then it does not hurt. Water can pour out of your eyes. You're in a place where you can think and feel and comprehend in ways that nothing else can do. And then he continues, so that's step number one. This is a practical thing. You find the place of reflection and then you start to engage in one part to it. This chapter is longer than some of the other chapters that are there. He's going to go through a bunch of different things that you can reflect upon. You will have to decide why you will choose to not reflect on them, or why you will make deliberate time to reflect on it. I went to this place today in Flatiron. It's called Stretched. Has anybody ever been to one of these places? It's just a place that stretches you out, right? Yeah, it sounds pretty bougie. It is. So I went there because I herniated some discs in my neck in the beginning of COVID. It was really bad. Our community is very large, alhamdulillah. We had to pivot a lot, virtual, online, but all kinds of people still reaching out in terms of homelessness, food insecurity, people now stuck at home with their abusers. You all, mashallah, raised $10 million in the onset of COVID to be able to help people in their time of need. And it's something that still, I'm so proud of this community in terms of how it stands and steps up for people when they are struggling. May Allah continue to make this a generous and giving community. But absorbing all this trauma, carrying it in, right? We live around multiple hospitals. The amount of death that was experienced, sickness that was experienced, all kinds of things, it could take a toll. And so my body was just collapsing on itself. And then I had to deal with the consequences of an absence of self-care at that time and being pushed to a limit, and what it resulted in terms of now my exercise routine and whatever else couldn't really do so much. So over the last 3 years, a lot of what I was able to do prior to, I couldn't fundamentally do. And this guy, I don't even know what he's doing. Straps on like my foot, he's like twisting it in weird ways, you know, like he's telling me to take deep breaths, but as he's like stretching me, he's like taking super deep breaths. And I'm like, who's like exercising who right now? But then he started doing things with my neck that I haven't done in 3 years. And I was scared to do them. I didn't know what would happen, because it wasn't just that the pain was there. This whole part of my body was swollen up to here, and my left hand didn't work for a while, and I had to teach myself how to use it again. I wasn't worried about that as much as what the pain did. It didn't allow for me to sleep longer than 10 minutes at a time. And then the painkillers they gave me caused ulcers in my stomach. So I just had to deal with the pain. There was no way around it. And the whole time, this man is doing this to me. And he's asking me questions. In my head, I'm just thinking, how did God make me that I literally saw the x-ray where it looked like a part of my spine was broken and everything just works again? And what did I do to make that happen? Other than time just healed my physical body. That's crazy. How does that work? Do you get what I'm saying? And so you spend time in this reflective mode. He then continues, know that you must reflect on the favors of God and His bounties which He has caused to reach you. Remember the favors of Allah that you may succeed. Should you attempt to number the favors of Allah, you would not be able to do so. All good things that you possess are from Allah. This kind of reflection results in the heart filling with the love of God and continuously rendering thanks to Him, inwardly and outwardly, in a manner that pleases and satisfies Him. And so, bullet point number 2, that you reflect on what you have that are blessings in your life. You reflect on what it is that can create deliberate acquisition of contentment, because He's telling you what the exercise is, and He's telling you what the yield of the exercise is, that it fills the heart with the love of Allah and continuously rendering thanks to Him inwardly and outwardly in a manner that pleases and satisfies Him. It just brings balance inwardly. The platitudes that we get fed quite often religiously don't always help. You want a prescription that can help as a vision modifier. That doesn't mean that you say challenge does not exist, but it allows for you to see the challenge differently, is to just engage in the deliberate reflection of things that you are grateful for. Foundational to this is reflection point number 1, because when you can understand that Allah is the one that put everything in its place, and that Allah is the one that gave you everything that you have, that just because you have it doesn't mean that you deserve it. Just because you want it doesn't mean that you need it. And just because you feel it doesn't mean that that's enough for it to create perspective that is true through the feeling, but it's given as a gift. Everything that you have, all of what you have, is given to you as a gift. My son, the other day, he plays with these things called Beyblades. Do you guys know what a Beyblade is? Right? Yeah. Why do you all know what a Beyblade is? Why do you know what it is?
The spinning thing, right?
No, yeah, that's what. But why do you know what it is?
I don't know. I
Have they not been around for a while?
I don't know. You're probably like, did you have them when you were younger? Or do you just have them as adults?
The guys?
Really?
It's okay.
My younger cousins.
It's a toy. You pull it on a string and it spins, right? And he loves it. And he couldn't find it and he got sad. And we talked to him about putting things in their place and where they belong. And then he found it a little bit later. And then he came to talk to me. And I said, Kareem, Allah is the one that gave you this. Me and your mother did not give this to you. And just think for a moment what you felt when you no longer had it. And think about how happy you were that you got it back. Allah is the one that gave it back to you. When you were given a ni'mah, the idea is to not just recognize the ni'mah, but to recognize al-mun'im through the recognition of the ni'mah. So you recognize the blessing and you recognize then the giver of the blessing. And when you recognize the giver of the blessing and the gift, you then also recognize, do I use it the way that the giver of the gift would want me to? Am I in a place where I appreciate that it was given to me in the first place, right? رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Right? The Arabic in the dua, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ, that, oh Allah, make from my wife, my offspring, a coolness of my eyes. هَبْ لَنَا literally is not give it to me, like رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا, but هَبْ لَنَا is make it a hibah for me. Give me the gift of this thing. You understand? And what he's saying here, Imam Al-Haddad, is when you can recognize the gifts that you have, you're then going to be in a place where it renders contentment. But you take it to its fullest extension. The recognition of the gift can then help you to understand that I need to use it the way the gift was intended to be used. Use your brain the way that it was gifted to you be used for. Use your skills, your talents, your credentials. Don't feign humility with confidence and gratitude. Embrace all of the spiritual gifts that Allah gave to you. And it's not going to look the same way as it's going to look for other people, and that's totally fine, right? Somebody might be a great singer, somebody might be a great orator, somebody might be able to run really fast, somebody might be a good cook, somebody might be a good listener, somebody might be good at drawing things. Everybody has different spiritual gifts, but everybody doesn't use them the ways that they're intended to. Right? Maulana Rumi, rahimahullah, he says that raise your words, not your voices. It is the rain that makes the flowers grow, not thunder. So all of us have the ability to communicate, and it's a gift. Because there's people who don't. You come to Jummah, you see the sign interpreter. You see people who are hearing impaired and how that affects also their verbal communication. Why did Allah give you the ability to speak? It wasn't to hurt people. And when you can recognize the gift and the giver of the gift, and you use the gift in the way that it's intended, it's going to make you feel good inside. That's the purpose of all of it. And what Imam Al-Haddad is saying in your reflection, think about what it was that you have been given daily, weekly, regularly. Does that make sense? Between this week and next week, I want you to just find a place of reflection. It's a spiritual exercise. Find a notebook, write at the top of it, what are the things that I am grateful for? What are the things that I have that are blessing, gifts in my life? And go to whatever extent you can as you yield to the process. Because as you get acclimated to it with regularity, you can then start to gain from it what can only be gained by doing it with regularity. Does that make sense? And then reflect on Allah's creation, on yourself, just the sheer miraculousness of everything that takes place around us, so that you can have awe when you're walking through the world and you're in a place where it's not pessimism, nihilistic worldviews, it's not cynicism that's going about. The Prophet had to believe that he could make things different. He had to have hope and optimism. He had to be in a place where he recognized that even if something's hard today, tomorrow will be better. The things that soften your heart are these things. They don't give you complacency, they give you contentment. What I'd like you to do is just turn to the persons next to you now. What are you taking away from today's conversation on a whole? And then we'll come back and discuss, and then we'll wrap up and pray Maghrib and have iftar. But go ahead.
Be thankful.
So what are some of the things we're taking away from today? This conversation. Any takeaways? Yeah.
I was sharing that there's so many gems that we share today, and I have to actively restrain myself from trying to catch all of them, lest I drop all of them. But the one thing I'm taking away is practicing intentional service. I think Allah, afforded me opportunities for solitude just in my life circumstances, but they're not always moments of intentionally instilled solitude. So when I do find myself alone, just not resisting the urge to do something is what I'm taking away.
Amazing. Other thoughts? Other takeaways? Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I was just saying how now I can look at things from different perspectives. I was just giving an example of how during COVID it was all depressing. You look at TV, they're talking about death and sicknesses around the world. When I step out of my house and I look at the sky, it was so blue, the air was so fresh, and I was like, okay, this could be Allah trying to also please the earth in a way. And then I go back home, watch TV, I see a video of Venice. You can see the water, you can see the fish moving around, you can see the bottom of the water. And I was like, okay, this is still Allah trying to show us destruction that we're causing. So it wasn't just about, the negatives that COVID brought, the deaths. I mean, people die every day. We lost a lot of loved ones in that grant them mercy. But then there's also a positive around it, trying to show us some things. I mean, even the waste that we generated pre-COVID, food waste, whatever kind of waste, it was just for me the way of Allah showing us that, okay, you could do things in a different perspective. So, yeah.
Yeah, right? I mean, the whole world is impacted by climate change, but we're the only ones that can actually do something about it, right? And we have to sometimes see what's there in order to kind of get things to the place that they need to be, fundamentally. Other thoughts? Anything we're taking away from today? Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but I guess intentionality, continuing that theme. So rumination versus reflection, being intentional about the periods of time and the environment you're doing it in, rather than constantly being in some kind of cognitive loop about yourself, or so basically not mistaking rumination for reflection.
Great.